I am Charlie Cleaver-Rogers, and I'm currently a senior service design contractor, currently contracted to a Scottish Government agency called Social Security Scotland, and I've been working with them just for the past 4 months. But my kind of background is in kind of consultancy and academia and education, so it's been quite eclectic to get to where I am now, but it's been an interesting journey, to say the least.
And obviously we kind of got you on board today to kind of discuss the topic of like service design. Traditionally, service design within or across the board really has been for people that have been within other jobs for 10 plus years and like interaction design have moved across, but there does seem to be this whole emerging need for more junior service designers and moving into the role. So you yourself obviously kind of come from that world and that kind of background. So yeah, keen to get your thoughts on, you know, the pros and cons of perhaps junior service design.
So, do you know, I'm going to start with the pros because I think there are definitely more pros that outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I ever heard of someone getting a job as a junior service designer, I was really excited because I just thought that is like a gateway role. Do you know, that's a kind of a graduate role or a graduate apprentice role into service design or into the UCD space. Because when I was at university, although we were doing like user-centered design thinking, these roles didn't massively exist in the kind of the wider public space, or they didn't in my head anyway. And I remember thinking that that is a really good thing for people to be able to get into user-centered design that maybe haven't came from a kind of traditional design background. I think junior level user-centered design specialist roles in general are a really good thing because I think you get a lot of return in your investment. But I also think it gives you the ability to help shape people and build people. You know, and I was saying this in various organisations that I've worked with, you know, if you've got a team of, say, senior service designers, you have got probably between, if you've got a team of 3, 4, 5, whatever, you've got enough information in those people's heads to be able to train and develop individuals that could then progress through the ranks of, you know, junior, midweight and senior, if you want to think of it in that kind of traditional way. So I think there is a big market, I think, for big companies or small companies who have senior designers or midweight designers to be able to help educate. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we should start thinking about. It also helps with kind of contingency planning, because I always think, you know, if there's a way that you can prevent something from happening in a company or in an organisation setting, then you should do any form of planning that you can to do that, because there's always going to be attrition. People are always going to have their finger on the pulse on new opportunities and stuff. And the more that you can nourish people's skills and abilities and then get them to progress, the more likely they are to be probably quite faithful to use an organisation.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting as well, because with the upskilling piece as well, I would see it as, you know, solving a retention issue, which, you know, the tech and the general world are seeing at the moment. But not only that, like service designers as a whole, they're difficult to hire. But I see this very much as plugging a skills gap, because if we actually look at the role of a service designer, it's very much like it's a team-based sport, right? They're not doing everything themselves.
No, I do see, I don't know if this is just me being a really selfish service designer, but I almost see us we're a bit like the spider that makes the web of UCD sometimes, where they're kind of bit in the middle. You know, where the link between user research and the user experience designer or the UI developer who makes the final product. And I think there is a definite need in that space for that transition of, if you're making a product, if you're working on a project, for it to transition in that way. But I definitely see it when you mentioned that retention issue, I definitely see it as something that could fix retention issues. I think the best thing that you can offer someone is the ability to learn. And if you can provide as many educational experiences as possible for individuals, and the more that they're able to grow in a role, the more confident they become as individuals as well. And that's I worked in HR for a couple of years at a previous organisation. I remember people were just always looking for an opportunity to learn.
And why do you think like this hasn't really been a thing? Because we're seeing a bit more of an emergence of junior service designers, but has it been internal structures at various organizations, or do you think it's more external, like barriers to entry, which are perhaps affecting service design?
So I think there's two things there. I think some organizations are so focused on doing client work, they kind of almost need people to be able to come in and run with projects, so they don't have the time to do the education piece, which just trips people up in the end, because then they're just working really good people into the ground really, really quickly, and then you've got no one to replace them when they eventually leave because they're exhausted. But I think there's another thing. I do think that user-centered design for some time has been quite gatekeepy. I remember when I first started in user-centered design, there was an assumption that you couldn't be a user-centered designer without having a background in design.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that is alien to me, because I always think, as someone who has transitioned careers quite a few times, from education and academia and whatnot, I just think surely there's a way for someone to learn that. So the first thing that I was looking at was, right, okay, I want to attend some conferences. I mean, I did my degree in product design, but I still wanted to expose myself to service design. I was thinking, let's look at conferences. We'll attend a few conferences and see what I can learn there, and then maybe that starts to form my thinking. And you go onto the website, and some of these conferences cost like 600 quid a ticket, and you're like, right, okay, I'm a fresh grad who is in the negative, not the positive in my overdraft, and I'm thinking, how can I ever afford £600 to go to a conference?
Yeah.
I just think, I think there's more that we could do as a community to make it more accessible. No matter what your background, and I mean that as whether you're a designer or not, or whether you've got 600 quid in your bank or not, it should be as accessible as possible.
The designers as well, they're the ones kind of doing the design. I guess if you've got a senior enough team, surely it makes sense that you could have someone in a service design position kind of holding all of that in place.
Oh, 100%. I think one of the jobs that I had years ago was as a learning designer, and I really loved that job, and I worked with other learning designers. None of them had a service design background, but my manager, Hamish, at the time, was really super interested in service design, and he was really forward thinking with his boss, Natalie, about how the service design thinking would be really impactful in the learning design space.
Yeah.
And I just think, had I stayed in that job a little bit longer, maybe I would have got the exposure to service design there as well, and it would have been reciprocal. How do we design education, but then how do we potentially design service design education? Might have been a thing that I've kind of brought up, but that's what I would quite like to move into now, is creating really, really super accessible service design education pieces. There's lots online, there's lots of articles that you can do online, but I think sometimes the best way to learn is through people and through doing.
And in terms of like where the industry is at the moment, like what do you think companies could be doing different to make their kind of environment a bit more friendly, or set up in a better way to introduce these people into their organizations?
Onboarding is a big thing. I think onboarding people properly, and getting them in the door, making sure they're settled, making sure they've got all the equipment they need to do their job, and then getting them to do project work would be something that I think I would look at. I know that's not always possible, because, as I say, if you come in at a midweight or a senior position, there is an element of trust that you can just run with what you're given, and that is fine. But if you are willing to employ junior service designers or any UCD specialist, you should have a structure in place in which they've got mentorship, coaching. I think shadowing is something that I think is really beneficial. The ability to shadow without the expectation of them having to deliver. Contribute to the work, but don't have to do the work. Is a big thing. So I think if you are in any way able to set up a kind of UCD mentoring space, a UCD coaching space, create what I would call an action learning set. Have people of the same level in that same room, digitally or physically, learning from each other, saying, oh, are you experiencing this in your field? Get that cross-pollination. It's so important. And then as those people grow as individuals, you're only going to have people who are really tolerant of other UCD specialists, know their field really, really well. But I think also people who are quite empathetic and are able to apply themselves in really different contexts, you know, put themselves in the shoes of, okay, I'm a service designer, but I know the user center, and I know the user researcher's doing this at the moment, so that I can then do this. I think you'd create a really, really powerful workforce. That
it's definitely seen to go that way in terms of like what I'm witnessing and kind of like the reason for, you know, kind of sparking off this chat. And I guess just kind of like wrap up with then, like, you know, if there are any people who are junior service designers like watching this or like thinking about getting to service design, any kind of advice for them?
Yeah, first of all, like, network. Just to talk to people. People in the user-centered design space years ago were a bit, you know, I'm talking 5-6 years ago, were maybe a little bit not as forthcoming. Nowadays, I would say that everyone is exceptionally approachable and would be willing to have a conversation with you. Network as much as you can. There is a really good space online, it's called Mega Mentor.
Okay.
And I actually found a mentoring partnership through that. And I have actually only met with one of the mentors once, but we have set up future chats. If you can go onto that, you can find loads of user-centered design specialists from all disciplines who are willing to give up some of their time so that you can have chats with them. There's some really, really good online resources, really good books as well. If you don't read, there's audio book versions available. If there is a user-centered design in government or user-centered design space or group in your local area, attend. And it might be quite nerve-wracking to think, oh no, I'm not going to just turn up and say, hi, I'm a junior service designer, or I want to be a junior service designer, because it is so encouraging for people like myself who get to meet really inspiring early career designers. And I'll use that word very carefully, it's early career designer, because, you know, someone could be a junior service designer who's had a 20 or 30 year career in academia or whatever, but they've decided to make the career switch. And those people should be welcomed as well.
So yeah, well, look, thank you so much for your time today. It is like really, really appreciated. And yeah, I'm hoping that our kind of audience will get something out of this which will be beneficial.
I hope so too. And anyone that's watching this, if you give out, you can send them a LinkedIn. They're more than welcome to contact me, and I'm happy enough to have a chat with anyone.
Cool. I'll tag you into all the posts and let them know where you are. All right.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charlie. Bye.
Thank you.